Hey class, this is Paul Cartmill, and for my presentation, I decided to look at Billy Collins' Nine Horses. The three poems that I wanted to look at through this volume is Litany, As to Demonstrate an Eclipse, and No Time. I really enjoyed this volume more so than I thought I would. I think it, a lot of his poems, a lot of Collins' poems, are really accessible and grounded in what I would call common language. It's not a lot of high language or high conceits or metaphors that we really need to unpack. It's all sort of right there, grounded but yet transcendent somehow. It's really good. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, I would recommend Billy Collins' Nine Horses. But like I said, the poems within this volume, I think Collins does what I think would be a great job in revealing the glorious and spiritual from the mundane and routine. He does this by using that common language, using those that kind of grounded wit, and transcends us to the important and eternal. So I'm going to jump right into the poems. The first one that I want to look at is Litany. There's a video circulating YouTube of Collins actually reading this poem out loud. If you're interested, I would just Google his name and this poem, and it'll pop right up. But as he's introducing this poem, he tells the audience that he took the first two lines from another poet's poem and rewrote their poem for them, for the poet. He said through a smirk that this type of theft is done out of courtesy of the other poet. When other poets think, or when he feels that poets fail to communicate the right message, he'll sometimes rewrite the poem for him. And I think this poem does a really good job in sort of communicating wit and a sense of humor through poetry. So I'm just jump right into the. I'm just gonna read a larger section out of the poem. I won't read the whole thing, but I want to give you an example of how his wit is sort of shown through here. So remember, the first two lines are written from another poem, are stolen from another poem written by another poet. In the original poem, I think it's important to say that the original poem sort of followed the traditional comparison of the beloved and the world in a flattering way. And so Collins takes this poem and sort of switches it around and inserts his own wit into it. So I'll just jump right into the text. This is Litany. You are the bread and the knife, the crystal goblet and the wine. You are the dew on the morning grass and the burning wheel of the sun. You are the white apron of the baker and the marsh birds suddenly in flight. This is where he turns it. However, you are not the wind in the orchard, the plums on the counter, or the house of cards, and you are certainly not the pine-scented air. There is no way you are the pine-scented air. It is possible that you are a fish under the bridge, or even the pigeon on the general's head, but you are not even close to being a field of cornflowers at dusk. So you can see his wit sort of come in here and sort of take this poem, sort of hostage by his sense of humor. And towards the end, he plays on this sort of imagery and tells his beloved, "It might interest you to know, speaking of the plentiful imagery of the world, that I am the sound of rain on the roof. I also happen to be the shooting star, the evening paper blowing down an alley, and a basket of chestnuts on the kitchen table. I am also the moon in the trees and the blind woman's teacup. But don't worry, I am not the bread and the knife. You are still the bread and the knife. You will always be the bread and the knife, not to mention the crystal goblet and somehow the wine." So he really interjects his own wit into this poem, and really takes us a different way than we would traditionally know, and certainly a different way than the original poem had us go. So I really enjoyed that particular poem from him. The second I want to look at quickly is a great example of how Collins takes the ordinary and transcends that moment, and transports us, or his readers, to a place that is, in my opinion, a deeply spiritual. And he does that in As If to Demonstrate an Eclipse. And I'm going to read this one because this is actually one of my favorite. This was actually my favorite of the whole volume. So I'm gonna read all of it. I pick an orange from a whisker basket and place it on the table to represent the sun. Then down at the other end, a blue and white marble becomes the earth, and nearby I lay a little moon of an aspirin. I get a glass from the cabinet and open a bottle of wine. Then I sit in a ladder backed chair, a benevolent God presiding over a miniature creation myth. And in the next lines, he turns it, or he transports us to a place that is, for him, deeply spiritual. And I begin to sing a homemade canticle of thanks for this perfect little arrangement, for not making the earth too hot or cold, not making it spin too fast or slow, so that the groves of orange trees and the owl become possible, not to mention the rolling wave, the play of clouds, geese in flight, and the Z of lightning on a dark lake. Then I fill my glass again and give thanks for the trout, the oak, and the yellow feather, singing the room full of showers as the sun and earth and moon circle one another in their impeccable orbits, and I get more and more cockeyed with gratitude. Um, this poem starts off in a very ordinary way. You can almost see him explaining or demonstrating what an eclipse is to a young child, using just mundane instruments, an orange, a marble, and an aspirin. And as he peers at this demonstration, he's transported, and he transports us along with him to a place that is really spiritual, where he's giving thanks for everything from groves to owls to the way that the earth orbits, even to yellow feathers. And he does this, and he takes sort of this ordinary moment and transcends us, or transports us to a place for him that is deeply spiritual. And I really enjoyed that poem. I really enjoyed how he did that. So that was I think a great example of that. The last one, really quickly, I'm kind of running a little long, but the last one I wanted to look at is an example of how he takes the mundane into how he transports the mundane into the extraordinary. And in this poem, No Time, I was reminded of our lecture this past week where we discussed, or we heard ideas on how to live like poets, and I think this poem does it. It's a very short poem, so I'll go ahead and read through this again, this one as well. In a rush, so this is No Time. In a rush this weekday morning, I tap the horn as I speed past the cemetery, where my parents are buried, side by side, a smooth slab of granite. Then all day long, I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval, while my mother calmly tells him to lie back down. And it's sort of that moment. It's sort of, I think what he does here is great again. It's sort of a scene. You can see a scene of someone just driving by, busy with their weekday routine, and just out of acknowledging that there's a loved one that they're passing so quickly, he taps on the horn. But then he sort of slows down time in this poem, and he connects us to something that's really extraordinary, and questions that. Then all day long, I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval. The idea that this mundane act can be transported into something so extraordinary. The idea that of what's really important in life. So I really liked this volume. I particularly liked this volume more so than I thought I would. And I hope you enjoy this site. A couple of the techniques or strategies that I found in this volume that I'm going to try to use in my poetry, or in my writings this week, is interjecting my wit, and sort of trying to slow down time in those little moments of life that sort of come and go again. This idea of just sort of hitting the pause button, or just trying to connect a spiritual moment within that mundane sort of moment, or time. So that's something that I'm going to try to do, and sort of try to write into, or hook into my writing. So I don't know if any of that made sense, but there you have it, and I hope you enjoy this.